Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm very excited here because we're actually starting a new podcast. So this is the Neural Audio Programmer podcast. So this is a little bit different from our other podcast, which is the Audio Programmer podcast, in that we're focusing specifically on neural audio and AI and machine learning and the advances that we're making in the audio space. So I have two very special guests with me that you may have seen on our channel before. We have Andrew Fyfe, who is the CTO at Neutone. How are things going, Andrew?
Yeah, good. Excited to be here.
Great. And Andrew is actually tuning in all the way from Japan. So tell us a little bit about
Yeah.
how things are in Japan.
I mean, it's good. I've not been here like super long. I actually moved over here in January of this year. And before that, I was based in Scotland. So yeah, originally sort of born and bred in Glasgow, Scotland. Um yeah, so it's quite fresh for me being over here, but I've adapted pretty well, I think, and enjoying it so far. So
That's
yeah.
awesome. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. And then I also have Christian Steinmetz, who is another face and name that you may be familiar with in the neural audio space. And he is a PhD researcher at Queen Mary University of London, but he's been doing a lot of traveling around the world as well. So where are you at the moment, Christian? Because it feels like every time we talk, you're in a different location.
Yeah, I mean, that's partly the life of a PhD. I think you can be moving around and constantly going to different things. But yeah, I'm calling from Boston today. And yeah, I like to spend a bit of time out here during the summer. About to head back to London very soon, though, to continue working on my PhD.
That's amazing. And I just think it's great just to have a moment just to think about and be appreciative of how this fantastic industry has given us the opportunity to travel around the world, see different cultures. I think that's one of the most exciting things that I've really appreciated about being in this industry and in audio programming, meeting amazing people from around the world. And that goes a little bit into what this podcast is about, specifically for neural audio. So, Christian or Andrew, can you just talk a little bit about how this podcast came to be and how the idea started as a seed and it's grown into something that's become a reality?
Yeah, Christian, do you mind if I
Yeah, go
start?
for it.
I guess this is the start of something that both myself and Christian initially like chatted about sort of exploring more, and we wanted to initially run a competition on neural audio, being both researchers in this area, working in this area. We both shared a sort of passion for neural audio and deep learning applied to audio and music tech. So that sort of laid this idea for the neural audio plugin competition, which was the sort of what we did before this launching this podcast. And I think the success of the competition that we launched before this really made us want to discuss this field more, but there was growing interest that we saw from the success of that the competition. And I think it took us by surprise as both researchers working closely in this area. We thought it was more of a niche than what it is now. There's a lot of research going on in this area and a lot of exciting things happening and hot topics, obviously, as well. And yeah, I guess the amount of submissions we had for the neural audio plugin competition, I think was like 19 in total, which was crazy. I think all of us didn't expect that amount of participation and amount of interest. So based on that result and the excitement and buzz around the discussion of neural audio and sort of AI music tech, we've kind of now wanted to take that forward and discuss more of these topics because there's more and more people in the area researching this. There's more and more movement happening. There's more and more challenges and philosophical challenges and ethical challenges and all sorts of things that we need to talk about. And I think this is the best platform to take that forward and open up that discussion and go more in depth So
Yeah, definitely. And like you said, that neural audio plugin competition that happened earlier this year was very exciting. It felt like we were just really flying by the seat of our pants, really just trying to deal with the response and trying to answer so many questions. And I was I was really surprised as well. I remember saying at the very beginning that I was hoping that we would get at least like 3 or 4 submissions. That would be amazing. And yeah, to have 19 submissions, and they were really widely varied as well. So
yeah.
what were some of your favorite ones? For me, I think the mixing, the DJ mixing one was one of my favorite one. It was called Hard, and basically the concept of that was that if you had 2 songs that were in a different style, that it aimed to actually crossfade those styles together. So if you had a dubstep song and a house song, you could, as long as those were tempo synced, essentially what it would do is it'd take the dubstep bass and synths and throw it over the house beat, or vice versa, the house melodic structure, and put it over the dubstep drums. So stuff like that is really exciting. And obviously, of course, it's something that it would need to be refined to become an industry type of product. But I thought that was very outside of the box. How about yourselves? What were some of your favorite ones?
Yeah, I mean, I actually had the same favorite as you, Josh. I really liked that plugin, and I actually, just to mention, I saw that the author of that plugin actually just published their paper that describes their algorithm as well, like maybe just this past week. I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but I'm put it onto my to read list basically, because I think even there he was including a lot more discussion on like how his method was actually working, which was actually novel in itself. You know, he was actually created some new architecture aspect in order to actually create that effect, which I also thought was super amazing for a competition of this scope.
Yeah. I mean, equally, yeah, it was I think fascinating, like that one in particular, like the way it decoupled those, like the harmonic and rhythmic like components in that way. It was like a really interesting use and application of sort of neural audio. I mean, for me personally, I'm kind of fascinated in this idea of extending timbral qualities and timbre, and sort of augmenting timbre in different ways. And so I think a lot of the sort of timbre transfer submissions that were experimenting with the real-time timbre transfer, like Cyclone and Combobulator, they were like interesting I think submissions. Also, I guess a little bit biased, but like some of the the Neutone submissions were awesome as well. But I think in particular, if I had to rate one, I think I would go with the one that was first place, Cyclone, just for the how great the interactive experience was as well when working with that kind of technology, which is very new. And I think that's one thing that we're exploring currently is these different ways of interfacing with neural audio technologies. And I think it's like a really interesting new challenge. Is how do we, as artists and musicians and producers, interact with new technologies like this? So yeah.
Yeah, you bring up a great point, and there are 2 points that I wanted to talk about there. One of which was the companies that supported us for that competition, and I want to shout them out really quick. Big shout to TikTok, Juice, Cosmo, Cycling 74, MathWorks, and GPU Audio, and also the Audio Programmer for supporting the competition. And piggybacking on that, some of those sponsors were obviously purveyors of various plugin frameworks, plugin workflows, and that touches on what you were talking about, which is that that these new exciting possibilities also create new demands in the way that musicians and creatives want to interact with user interfaces interact with the things that they may want to typically do in a plugin. And I know this is something that we've talked about in the past offline a little bit, which is just looking at the plugin formats right now and seeing if those are enough to bring in various neural networks and bring in those workflows, or if it's more worthwhile to start thinking outside of the box and start looking at different types of workflows and seeing what those bring to us. What are your thoughts on that? I know, Christian, you've had some opinions that you've expressed in the past on that. What are your thoughts on where this space of neural audio is going? Do you think it will that it'll be mainly confined to VST AU formats, or do you think that there's something else on the horizon that could be coming?
Yeah, so I think that's definitely a deep discussion. But to give just some of my high level thoughts on it, I think right now we're kind of seeing two predominant paradigms. The first one is what you just mentioned, basically kind of traditional VST-like development. That kind of means that you design some plugin around the restrictions that already exist with VST and try to implement your AI model in that way. And you might end up having to do something sophisticated in your plugin to like work around those limitations. If you want to do, for example, communicate with another track in the DAW, for example, you might have to engineer some sort of backend server that's sending information back and forth to do that, or have other hacks to do it. I think that what that really has resulted in is largely less development in the plugin space with regards to kind of the potential of AI. Like there could be a lot more that could be done if we could remove those restrictions. And so I think, maybe in the future we will see new plugin formats or advancements on the plugin formats we have now that kind of try to facilitate that. But I'm more skeptical on that. That feels like something that would take a very long time. So I think right now the other thing that we see, the other paradigm is kind of browser-based or other kind of outside the DAW or like outside the native DAW ways to use AI. And so there's kind of a few different web-based DAWs out there, as well as those that are in development. I think BandLab being a popular one that's gotten a lot of traction as like being just a dedicated browser-based DAW. They have a lot of control over what happens, and they can have inter-track communication if they want it. So that could be a platform where AI actually could have like more immediate impact potentially. And then there's other ones that come to mind, like Never Before Heard Sounds is a startup that's been working on kind of similar types of applications, specifically for this idea of like having an AI first web-based DAW. So like if I rebuilt the DAW from the ground up, but took into account, the fact that I can have stem separation, that I can have timbre transfer and stuff like that, how would I like integrate that into a DAW? And so I think seeing where that goes will be really exciting as well. But for me, the big question is really, adoption, I think, around those kinds of things. So like I'm skeptical, I think, as others are, around like professionals adopting browser-based DAWs. And so I think that's going to be a big challenge, like for the field moving forward, of how do we kind of get around the limitations of native plugin formats, without using browser-based DAW. Like I don't have the answer to that, but it seems like people really favor kind of the traditional plugin paradigm actually as it stands now from like a workflow perspective. But we still have to kind of figure out a way to work around those limitations.
Yeah, and you bring up a great point, which is that it's actually a multi-layered problem, because it's not only the plugin formats, but it's also the current DAWs as well. So you have a couple DAWs that are very dominant in the market right now. FL Studio, which actually just came out with stem separation, interestingly. You have Ableton, Pro Tools, Logic, and also trying to get those workflows in. And as you know, with those traditional plugin formats, it can be very challenging to get it, a lot of the workflows that you want within a neural audio creative process involve being able to read from other tracks, being able to know more information about what's happening within your project that many DAWs don't willingly give out. So it's very difficult to get that information into your, I'll just call it a creative process, your plugin. So any thoughts on that, Andrew?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with a lot of the stuff that you guys have been saying there. I think what I've seen is like over the years, kind of exploring this area, plus being traditionally working as a plugin developer, is that yeah, it seems to be that people are hesitant to adopt sort of new workflows. It's very slow moving. For example, the most easy example to refer to is just how you're still using MIDI, like standard MIDI, and even though with the new MIDI 2.0 coming out and stuff like that, it's been relatively, I think, slow in like being like adopted into some of the Daws and being adopted by the musicians and producers themselves. And I think it's the same with these new technologies as well. It's like trying to find ways that these technologies can fit, like slot into workflows that people are familiar with and used to, and it's not creating too much like friction or bringing them too far out their comfort zone, so that they feel they're more likely to accept these new technologies in their workflow. I think that's one thing. I think, and that's maybe more like in the short term, but yeah, obviously in the long term, my hope is that we will migrate more to formats and applications that cater for and are designed around the new sort of research and technologies that are coming out in AI and machine learning and stuff like that. And that there's a lot of people that are striving for that already, like Christian mentioned, the web Daws and sort of building from the ground up with like AI first. But again, it's just like it's trying to get people to adopt the new technologies. It's trying to make it seem appealing, and I think people kind of like to layer on like their tools. Like they have a collection of VST plugins that they use in their workflow and the production. It's like they want to kind of add things to their current workflow, I think, that they have a handle on, rather than jumping between too many different things. But I'm not saying that that's a lot of people also like to do that, and that's totally fine. But there's also that audience that are they kind of like to stay within what they know. So again, it's like trying to cater for both of these two things, like trying to have tools that fit within common and familiar workflows, but also trying to also think about moving towards more optimized and efficient workflows and platforms that actually are catered for the new advances in technology as well. So yeah, it's an interesting challenge, I think.
Yeah, do you think that the web is really going to move up in terms of use in the pro audio space? Do you see that coming along more and more in the coming years?
It's difficult. I mean, it has a lot of potential, I guess. I think there's definitely something to be said about like distributed processing as well. So like trying to move processing like off of especially like when we're starting working with even like heavier weight technologies, like moving the processing off of the local machine and onto like a more distributed way of like processing and audio. So there is that potential eventuality that we all go down that road, because it could potentially make things really quick, and they can do a really heavy processing not on their local machine. So there's that advantage. But I guess again in the short term, like it's hard to move people from what they know onto these new technologies. And I think the one of the biggest downsides that I've seen with the new web technologies is that you can't bring what you know with you easily. You can't bring your plugins with you to start working with them in the DAW. So it feels like you almost need to like cut part of you off and sort of like let it go and say like, right, I'm starting a clean slate now with what I know, and into something new. And yeah, maybe with the new generations, people coming up, like that's the kind of what we'll see happening. But there's definitely a lot of people that aren't budging and want to like hold on to what they know. So it's an interesting challenge. Yeah.
Yeah, and you I think one big question there is just really trying to round down what are DAWs missing today, or what is it that we would need from a DAW in order to be able to have the types of workflows that we would like. One of them is more information about the session, right? So like specifically what information would we like about a project session that you would think would be helpful for people who want to use these workflows? What sort of things? So like you got tempo, what other things would there be?
Yeah, I think it actually really even goes beyond that in my mind. And I feel like the easiest way to frame it can be kind of the eventual goal, for me, it really is kind of like the AI co-pilot for your DAW. So it's actually less about just having some information about the session. It's actually about any action that a current human audio producer can make in the DAW. The AI system should be capable of making that action. And obviously, you can see that opens up a super high level of complexity because you're kind of asking for a complete API into each and every DAW, which are they're completely hidden from you in most cases, except for something like Reaper, which has an API, but it's fairly difficult to use from a developer perspective. But there is kind of something there, right? But then you look at things like the most used DAWs like Ableton or Logic or Pro Tools, like there's kind of that kind of level of control is completely opaque to any kind of user. So I see that as a huge challenge. But kind of back on our earlier point of like these different paradigms of what exists now, right? Like we were saying, okay, one, you could build a VST plugin that's kind of an AI model that's contained within a VST. You could build your own DAW essentially in a web browser, and then you kind of have full reign. Or you might be one of the few people that already own a successful DAW product like Logic or Ableton, right? And I think those players are in an interesting position because they would have the ability, right, to implement some of these features. And like you mentioned, Josh, FL Studio adding stem separation is kind of one example of that that we've seen recently, like where kind of the established player can kind of make a move that would impact a lot of users without the users having to at all change their workflow, like Andrew was saying. And I think that's super powerful because what I see right now, when you look to kind of the research side of things, or like the latest developments in kind of neural audio stuff, it's very much kind of a all or nothing when it comes to workflow. Like if you want to use AI, you kind of have to give up everything that you were doing in the normal DAW to like go work in some other land, which is like a Colab notebook or some sort of code that you're running on the terminal and stuff like that. And it's completely removed from your normal workflow. And a lot of the times you have to also give up kind of any control that you have that you would have had in the other parts of the process. So if I think of these like recently popular like text to audio models, like I type in a text prompt and get some audio signal, right? I can like synthesize now like some section of a song that has multiple instruments playing at the same time, but I don't have control over those individual instruments, in the way I would in a DAW, right? Because now I just get back like a stereo audio file, and within that has a bunch of different components, but I can't actually edit them or get at them, right? Without basically changing my prompt and passing that to the model again. And what I think one major challenge, and what I would love to see, eventually get resolved is kind of merging the world of traditional DAW with kind of these AI tools, right? So, I could generate some, thing with a text prompt, but then I would have the ability to, edit each individual component. I could go in there and edit the MIDI note of one particular instrument that was being played, and I could add a compressor to the drum kit or something like that, using traditional DAW like tools to do that, instead of this kind of like fully opaque system now that where I give up complete control and all I can do is type a text prompt, for example. So I think that's a fundamental challenge, and I'll be interested to see, which of these kind of paradigms, become successful in that. And maybe there's another one that we haven't considered also.
Do we think that the near future of that will be of our interaction with AIs within DAWs would start off with text prompts? Would that be kind of your first point of contact for that, or do we see things going further in the way that we actually interact with these systems and collaborate with them?
Yeah, I'm personally very skeptical of text prompts as like an interface for these kinds of things for many reasons. One of the two main ones I'll throw out, I think the first is, as anyone that's worked with audio will know, like trying to describe what you want when it comes to sound is really difficult with text. And even humans trying to discuss about how should this snare drum sound different, we'll go back and forth about what they actually mean. And I think you can get somewhere with it, but it's probably very frustrating. And that's why a lot of kind of sound, it's like the sound design process and kind of getting a sound you want is actually a lot about exploration, right? Like in some cases, you don't know where you're going. You're just like, oh, what if I turn this knob? Or what if I pick, this preset that's like punchy kick 7, and then I listen to that, and like kind of like I'm just going through this list, and it's not actually about like any semantic information that I can write down. It's just I'm just like clicking through every single possible option until I find what I want, and I know what's right and what's wrong, but conveying that in text is really hard. So I think that's one fundamental limitation maybe from audio. And I think the other one that I would raise as well is, I think this is true of text interfaces in general, which is that they have very poor kind of affordances to the user about the possibilities that they enable, right? Because if I just show you this blank text box and you're a new user, you're like, well, what can this system do? I don't even know what it's capable of. So I might try to type some things in, but maybe it can do something that I don't even know, I didn't think of that it could do, right? And I think that's interesting when you try to compare like some sort of AI audio processing model to, let's say, a traditional VST audio effect. The designer of that VST audio effect sat down and thought about what were the parameters that I should expose to the user that would be useful to help them explore the space of possibilities of this, DSP. Which is that when you then kind of remove that and just put out a text box, that's actually in some sense a much lazier or less curated approach, you could say, to building some sort of interface here, right? Because now there's no designer deciding, what are those knobs, what are those parameters, and the user now has a huge burden to figure out what can I even type in here, where should I start, where should I go? And so I see that as a fundamental challenge also.
Yeah, it almost like creates like sort of paralysis.
Yeah.
There's too many options. But at the same time, like trying to tap into some of those options through text is challenging. So yeah, I agree with Christian on that. I think interfacing, especially in the our interface design in the audio domain, music tech domain is completely different to how we're seeing these text interfaces being used in other areas. And I think it doesn't really apply the same. There is an element, as Christian said, of kind of feeling about in the dark for something that you kind of want to uncover or just explore. And I think just sort of trying to double down on ways to intuitively give sort of hooks into an exploration space that gives some kind of sense of control for the user, or some sort of feeling of like they're steering steering the ship and exploring different sonic possibilities. I think is important, and I don't quite think you get that same experience with text, for example. So again, that's another really interesting problem. And I think VSTs and plugins have made, over the years have really allowed for a lot of different kinds of interactions to be possible when exploring sound. And I think that's one of the good things about audio plugins, even though they have the technical limitations that maybe aren't so nice to work around when working with AI. When it comes to like creating a sort of an interface into controlling audio, we've seen so many different kinds of ways of exploring that, I guess, and giving different ways of interacting with things, from 2D to 3D to all sorts of kind of experiences. So there's pros and cons, I think, to what we have now and where we want to go. So yeah.
Yeah, very interesting. You brought up a couple great points. One of those is about not knowing where to start when you're presented with the text box. And I know for me, when I don't know where to start, the first place I want to go is somewhere familiar. So I want to, if I'm thinking of a snare sound or I'm thinking of a kick sound, first thing I want to do is I want to reference something that I know. And LLMs for, of course, ethical reasons, and for, you know, other reasons as well, data reasons. A lot of them prevent referencing known songs, known artists, things like that. And I think another thing that's really interesting, and this is my personal observation, seeing, you know, hearing commercial music now in this you know, over the past, you know, 15, 20, 30 years, is that as the possibilities have grown, now we have, you know, access to any sound that you could pretty much possibly imagine. Any plugin is at our fingertips with any type of workflow, any type of emulation, pretty much, that we tend to just all generalize towards a middle ground. I don't want to say we all, but many of us, or many people, tend, and we don't see this just in music, we also see this kind of in fashion, in so many different sectors, how there's a generalization where everybody, the possibilities are so immense that we all just kind of say, okay, I'm going to go back to the 808 snare drum and the 808 kick. I find that very interesting, being that in the 80s, you of course, you know, had the invention of the 808, but there were a lot of people that were trying to be creative in exploring outside of that. You know, like I was watching a video recently about Michael Jackson's Thriller, and they were talking about the Linn drum and about how they were using special modules to actually modify what sounds the Linn drum could actually make. And just trying to find something that was a little bit different. So everything then was about being different. Whereas I feel like nowadays, when we're presented with the immensity of the possibilities of being able to make any sound, we all kind of generalize towards the same. And I'm wondering if there could be a potential problem in that space if we were to go towards a workflow where we could say, well, anything is possible, just type it in and reference whatever you want. If you want a Calvin Harris song or Calvin Harris style synth, you can just say Calvin Harris style synth and it'll pull it up for you. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, some good points, I guess. Yeah, so I guess, like, you know, the interesting thing that you were talking about there is this idea of like referencing something, and I think you know, people like to reference an idea or some sort of sound or some sort of starting point before they then try and do something with that to try and make it their own. And I think yeah, that's something that's very difficult to get from these text-based interfaces and technologies where you're like you're saying anything is possible. So that sort of makes you think that maybe, yeah, the text interface will not sort of be the main adopted way going forwards, or interface going forward for working with AI technologies, and instead maybe there'd be interfaces that you can essentially, yeah, drag and drop sound files and things like that you can have as a reference that then you can then augment, and maybe you can fuse things together. For example, like I want some of this and I want some of the components from this sound and that sound, and then sort of almost like, yeah, finding this interpolated space in between that creates something a bit different. Or, you know, having something that, you know, we've seen some technologies where you can give a reference sound, and it best fits like the parameters of that particular tool to try and create that sound. And then you go, right, well, I know these higher level parameters, I've got something that fits this, but this kind of sound, but how can I now augment that with the parameters that I know and have intuition of? So like changing this and changing that, changing the different parts of the frequency or different effects, and create something that's I guess personalized to you. I think that is a potential avenue for things to to go. Like, and we're already kind of seeing some of these interfaces emerging already around this kind of idea. So yeah, I don't imagine, even though there's a huge buzz around the whole LLM and text interface, I don't, even though it might have its place, you know, within modern music production, I don't think it'll be the single most, like, you know, that is the interface to rule all interfaces. I think we'll within this medium we'll always be exploring different kinds of interfaces to give a kind of the user a higher sense of control of, you know, the music making process, I guess.
Yeah. Sounds like the next frontier may be a bunch of three-dimensional point clouds. So switching gears, one question that I wanted to bring up that we've talked about in private that I think people may be wondering is why we decided to call this the Neural Audio Programmer podcast rather than the Music AI podcast or anything around AI. Just wondering if you could talk a little bit about that, about some of the differences between AI, machine learning, neural audio, and some of the other terms that we may be hearing around this space.
Yeah, sure. I can say a few words about that from my perspective. You know, I think it's also a lot motivated by kind of our choice in how we designed the NAP competition. That's right, last year, right? Like this idea and how we kind of defined a neural audio plugin. I think it was kind of inspired a lot by that. And if I recall correctly, kind of our definition there was this idea of, you know, using a neural network approach or kind of similar approach based on kind of the most modern predominant type of machine learning technique that's used now, and integrating that into a plugin basically. And that means, you know, it doesn't mean like, right, one view of that is it means that like, oh, you need a machine learning model that's like manipulating audio or synthesizing audio in order for that to be true. But as we kind of said, we could kind of loosen that all the way to say, well, it could actually be a machine learning model that controls certain DSP components or makes decisions based on something, you know, external signal, or for example, even does something like transcribe the audio into MIDI notes, right? Like those are all things that would qualify, even though they might not appear to be kind of what you would think of as neural audio plugin at first, right? And so I think we really wanted to kind of stick with that kind of focus, right, for this podcast, because when you start talking about music AI, we could also just start talking about a bunch of other topics as far as like, you know, music recommendation or things like that that are also really relevant, but not what we wanted to focus on like in this podcast, which was really about kind of around, you know, people that are working as software developers or as researchers, you know, in the space of audio, where we're kind of using these models as tools often for creative people or in audio production, or in video games as well, like kind of where there's this like aspect of using neural networks and kind of deep learning models specifically for these kinds of audio applications.
Yeah. Any thoughts, Andrew?
Yeah, I think you know, one of these things, like when we're talking about neural audio and these tools like neural audio plugin, for example, I think it gives, you know, I think we all collectively agree on this as well. It kind of gives a better idea of what it is that is powering the plugin and the technology. It's one I feel like with the using, like throwing around terms like AI, it's kind of sometimes making things more ambiguous. It's also kind of potentially you know, making the tool that we're creating seem like intelligent. And I think that has a lot of connotations and potential conflicts, especially when we're working or producing tools for artists and musicians. This idea of something as intelligent and you know, approximating human intelligence sometimes can, I guess, sound threatening and to some people. And I think neural audio and sort of saying that it's plugins and software that's driven by and powered by neural networks is a kind of truer reflection of like what it really is. And at the end of the day, we're trying to create new tools that are designed with novel technologies powering them to tap into something new, or to do something that's potentially useful and improve a workflow, for example. It's not always necessarily about trying to replace the human component and replace humans with this intelligent tool, intelligent system that's trying to approximate human intelligence. So I think, I guess like there's a bit of that, I think, in the discussion when we were talking about it before. And I think keeping it to like neural audio allows us to kind of really isolate the technology and the technologies that are powering these new tools, rather than sort of making it sound ambiguous and putting this kind of the AI kind of buzzword over it that might not that might be sort of or have sort of different connotations, negative and positive, I guess.
So it sounds like you're talking about the need for these processes to remain in a collaborative type of context rather than something that's taking over for us.
It's like a kind of co-creation, or something that's an extension or augmenting human creativity is kind of the idea. I don't think musicians or creators want to have this whole process like automated by some sort of intelligent system that's approximating human intelligence. Like it's not what it's all about. And I think so like reframing it and thinking about having tools that are using neural networks and these new discoveries and new innovations to enhance what we already can do, enhance the capabilities and extend what's possible, and potentially uncover new terrain that we've never we've never explored before. And I think that's kind of, for me anyway personally, that's kind of what excites me, and I think is the thing to kind of focus on when working with these and sort of communicating these new technologies to producers and musicians that are interested or curious about it.
What are some of the most interesting things that you've been seeing lately in this space? So I know, Christian, you read a lot of academic papers. I've seen a couple on your Twitter that look really exciting. Can you just talk a little bit about some of the more exciting trends that you've seen lately?
Yeah, definitely. So I'll first say, I think there's three things I want to mention that come to mind. The first, I think, is kind of what we were discussing about a little bit before. So just to give a little bit more context on that, I think we've definitely seen kind of the text to audio or text to music based models getting a lot of attention in this space. And some of these like Music LM is one of them. There's Music Gen, I think, from Meta, and a few other similar types of models here that have been kind of been developing and coming out in the last few years that kind of get this. They kind of all fit a similar kind of paradigm where you train a model to, you type a text prompt and basically generate some audio that sounds like whatever you described in that prompt. And these models all also kind of have converged on a relatively similar type of mode of operation as well, where what you do is first train this kind of model called a neural audio codec, which is, as it kind of sounds, it's somewhat related to something like MP3 codec, but uses a neural network to do this. And basically, you first train a model that learns to compress audio into some very small kind of sequence of tokens, as they're called. And after you train this neural network to do that, You can then train a language model on top of those tokens, basically. And then what you can do is now use that language model to generate new audio by generating a new sequence of tokens and passing it back to the decoder of this neural audio codec to resynthesize the audio waveform for a new audio signal that technically never existed before. And these approaches, actually build upon like a few years of research, like putting together multiple different components, basically, in order to build like one singular model that's capable of doing this kind of text to audio kind of synthesis. And I think that's really captured a lot of people's attention because they were able, because these models are able to kind of generate a wide range of types of content. Like a lot of neural like audio synthesis models in the past were very constrained to like, I build a model that will just generate me, infinite piano kind of songs, right? But here you kind of have a model that will generate you both sound effects as well as music, as well as kind of environmental sounds, and with varying levels of kind of convincing quality as well. So while I think those have kind of captured most of the attention right now, recently in the audio kind of space, they're not kind of what I'm most excited about personally. The other things that I'm excited about are the other 2 points I want to mention. The other one that I think we've seen a lot of movement on recently, which uses kind of a relatively different kind of tech under the hood, is this kind of like voice conversion or singing voice conversion, right? Which a lot of people I think were exposed to in these kind of like AI covers, as they were called, where you kind of like applied some source separation to a pop song, removed the original vocalist, and then replaced in that song a different vocalist of another pop artist in the place of that other one singing that song, basically like creating a cover of a pop song from another famous person that never previously existed. And this has become possible because of these kind of voice conversion models that would let you basically, actually you could sing and then, make your voice sound like you're Kanye West or Ariana Grande and things like that, which I think immediately looks like a very powerful tool for artists if we can kind of get that right as far as like how the licensing works, and how that can play out kind of in a way that benefits everybody. And there's a lot of startups now that are working on that kind of idea, right? But that to me seems like something that's really useful because you could actually see how, someone that's not an amazing singer or someone that wants to, produce a song with a different type of singer than they are, in their track, that would actually enable that in a really cool way. Yeah, so I think that's also really exciting. And the last thing I'll mention is kind of what I'm personally most excited about, is this area of what we kind of call differentiable signal processing, which is kind of an emerging research area in the last few years. And I'm very biased because this is partly what my research in my PhD is focused on. But the idea here is kind of slightly detached from the other two topics, which are a lot about, trying to generate audio in a general sense. And it's more about how can we build machine learning models that control, existing tools? Like, what if I already have a synth that I like DX7 or, some other type of synth, or I have a bunch of audio effects, that I already know can be used to create like a really awesome mix of this track. And I don't want to replace those with a machine learning model, but I still want a machine learning model to help me, automate that process or discover new sounds. How can I go about using machine learning to actually connect it with this like existing paradigm of DSP-based tools, whether it's synths or audio effects? And so differential signal processing is this kind of new approach to try to facilitate like merging these two worlds. And I think we haven't really seen as much movement there as we have seen in the other spaces I was just talking about, partly because it's a more difficult problem to solve, because again, it's this kind of like, we're trying to like not throw away everything that we already have, right? Because these like text to audio models, they kind of throw away all the knowledge of synthesis that's baked into every existing synthesizer, and they throw away all of our sample libraries, right? And they kind of replace all of it with a giant machine learning model that does everything. And so I think this other really promising direction of, well, how could we actually better merge kind of AI tech with existing tools so we don't give up the power and the flexibility and the expressivity of the existing tools we have and all of that development knowledge, but still take advantage of like the power of some sort of machine learning or intelligence system.
Nice.
Yeah, I just wanted to like add on that, add to that, Christian. Like, you were saying about like, yeah, essentially not giving up the stuff that we already have that we know, that we like, or it does something really well. And another example of that is how we've been representing music for for the hundreds of years or whatever, like in this symbolic representation and notation, for example. And I think again, instead of like using text interfaces, we've adapted like over these years other ways of representing music and sound that could potentially be more expressive or provide more control than using text. So like there's these symbolic symbolic generative models that are working with this like kind of higher level musical symbolic data or symbolic representations to describe and generate music. And I think that's like really another kind of really exciting area that is reusing and sort of building off of things that we've already established over like hundreds of years essentially. So yeah, I think there's definitely merit in that side of things as well.
Wow. So what does this data actually look like in comparison to, I know that it might be difficult to describe, but can you give me an example of how this would look different from a traditional classical music structure notation?
Yeah. Oh, well, yeah. I guess like it was. I mean, the data could be classical music notation, but it could also be. There's been some great research recently that's been working with like guitar tablature, for example, as a representation. So there are more modern ways of representing music as kind of higher level symbolic data. That includes MIDI as well, or OSC data, MIDI. Guitar tablature. There's like quite a few representations that we can leverage, I think, for building and generating music and audio. So yeah,
that's great. I think it's a great time for us to start wrapping up. So yes, I'm once again feeling very grateful and privileged to have both of you with me on this new podcast. And we're going to be doing this podcast at least once per month, aiming to have that out on the last week of the month. So be on the lookout for that. We're also going to have special guests and other announcements as well. Any parting notes, Andrew, Christian?
Yes, just that I feel like we've just scratched the surface here. So yeah, everyone stay tuned for what's still to come. I was just like getting all fired up there, like for like another round of discussion. So yeah, I'm looking forward to next month to explore a lot of these topics more.
Yeah, Christian.
Yeah, definitely. There's so much to say here, and I also am looking forward to being able to dive into the discussion on some of these topics with other people like our guests that we'll bring on. And I'm still hopeful that we might be able to see through my dream of hosting some kind of debate around these topics, because I'm just interested in seeing kind of some diverse discourse around these topics of AI and audio and music. And I think if you're someone that's interested in debating on these topics, if you have a strong opinion, definitely reach out to us, because we'd be looking to see how to make that happen in a way that would be interesting and fruitful for further discussion. For example, even something like, what is the actual impact that AI is going to have on music creators? Because you hear a lot of hype, right? You might hear, oh, AI is going to revolutionize everything in music creation. Or you hear the other side of the spectrum of, oh, AI has no impact on me as a musician. I'm going to continue doing what I'm doing. So I'd really love to see that kind of fleshed out in detail and see where we land.
Absolutely. I think I know a couple strong personalities who may be interested in getting involved in that debate. Great.
I think also, Josh, sorry, just to add on to that, is just like these are some of the conversations that are definitely essential at this fundamental time of these new technologies that are emerging. So I think we look forward to having more discussions with people that have opinions to share, because I think we really need to address these topics, and we need to start having these conversations to sort of I guess resolve potential issues or identify potential issues.
Absolutely. So much more to come in future episodes. Great. thank you very much, Andrew and Christian. Once again, we'll be announcing the next episode, which we aim to have for the end of the month, last week of each month. And in the meantime, please feel free to join our Discord for more discussion on these topics. You can find out more about that at theaudioprogrammer.com/community. And with that, we'll go ahead and sign off. Thank you very much, Christian. Thank you very much, Andrew. And we will see you again soon.
See you.